Welcome to How to Shoot a Basketball. Today we are going to talk about loading our hands. A lot is made of more of the traditional mechanics, our balance obviously, how that ball moves up a line, where our elbow is, all that kind of good stuff. But what about our hands? What about how our hands are positioned before that ball even starts to make its way up the body, and how we can position them to be at most advantage to us and our ability to shoot the basketball consistently, right? So what I mean by the loading of the hands is this, right? Getting a slight little wrinkle of the wrist, some people would say. But how do we do it? So what I'm going to do first is I'm going to walk you through kind of a step-by-step guide in terms of how we can start to position our body and our hands in the way that we can actually load them. And then we'll get into some exercises on what we can do to be super mindful of it, working in stationary drills all the way up to some more dynamic ones in which everything comes down to how the hands are loaded on the basketball. Okay, so what we'll do to start is we'll actually just put our ball down. Okay? Put our ball down, and we're going to put our hands right here at our sides. Now, if you are right-handed or left-handed, you're going to see that we're going to do this either way in terms of how both hands move initially, but I'm going to do this all from the right-hand side. So if you're left-handed, just do opposite of what I'm doing. Okay, so if I'm standing here, hands at my side, I'm going to stick out my right hand as if I'm going to shake somebody's hand, right? So I stick out my right hand. You see my palm is out, my thumb is up, okay? From there, I'm going to take my guide hand, which is my left hand, and I'm going to do the same thing like I'm shaking somebody's hand with my left hand. So here we are left with our hands at our sides. You can see my elbows are more so attached to my hips, not flared out, attached to my hips here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my shooting hand and I'm just going to turn my palm towards the ground, okay? So I just took it from side, thumb in the air, to now palm to the ground. When I go palm to the ground, what I'm going to do now is I'm just going to lift my wrist slightly, right? So I'm just going to bend that wrist back. So you, looking at me, the camera, you should start to see the palm of my hand a little bit. Now, I don't want you to jam it back, right? I'm not asking you to jam it back as far as you can, just a slight lift, right? This is more than enough of a load. From there, you're going to take that guide hand, thumb, move it over to your midline so it's in line with your belly button. And then from this position now, remember I have this slight little load here. We're just going to pull our elbows back and in. And right here is where we would call our one position. And you'll see my hands are loaded in this position, right? So let me do this with the basketball and you'll see what I mean. So right now my hands are on the basketball, both on the side this way. I would turn this hand over, my shooting hand, so that my palm is on the ground. My palm is facing the ground. Thumb on my guide hand still pointed up. And then from here, it's that slight load. Now, because I've already brought the guide hand on the ball, you'll see that I'm already favoring my midline in terms of where my guide hand thumb is. So from there, after my slight load here, I can now just pull that ball right in. You can think about pulling that guide hand to that belly button, and that's going to keep that ball nice and kind of loaded on the right side or strong side of your body. So if you're left-handed, that'll be more on this side. We just want to think about if our body's cut down the middle, we want that ball to shade our strong side versus being on the opposite side of that line. Doesn't mean the ball can't touch the line, but we do want it to shade that strong side so that we can then keep the ball moving up a line. Now, the big thing here is when I load, we all don't have to load in this perfect line where I'm just taking my arm out straight here and bringing back. I can load and play around with the placement of the one position. So if you are somebody that likes to hold that ball more middle versus on the right side of the body, this is more than acceptable too. And you can see that if I remove the basketball, I still have the same load. You can see my forearm, wrist, and fingers are all still pointed the same direction. All I did was take this movement here, or this position here, and just slightly turn it over, pointing to the left. Kind of similar to like if I had a tilt in my shot, my toes are pointed to 11, that ball's probably going to be pointed to 11 too. If you're left-handed, that ball's pointed to 1, that ball would still be pointed to 1 if you're bringing that ball more midline. But that's how we're going to load our hands. Simple method to do here, just loading the hands simply there. But what this starts to do is it starts to allow me to get under the ball faster, right? If I'm leading on this push motion to the 2 versus a pull backwards, that push lets me create momentum that serves in contribution to the target. But if my hand starts more so on the back, and again, not jammed back, but just more so on the back, if you think about where that hand has to end up to shoot the basketball, I don't care who you are, you eventually have to get under. The more on the back I am and leading with the push, the quicker I'm going to get my hand and transition from being on the back to being under. It's a pretty short distance, right? If I were to start with my hand on top of the basketball, I now know that I have to go from on top all the way eventually to being under, right? that's a much longer path for that ball to have to travel, and it usually means a direction change up top. So if I started with my hand on top, I'm gonna have to bring that ball up and eventually have to rotate that ball backwards to get my hand underneath the basketball. So first drill we're going to do, we're just going to start in our drop position, hips down, chest up, chin up, eyes up, hand actually on top of the ball, because all I want you to do is put your focus on loading the hands, right? I'm not moving the ball up, I'm simply loading my hands, nothing else moves. Hands become the big focus of attention. I load, and then I focus on my push, 2, through. Drop the level, load, 2, through. I'm doing these at the foul line. I think the foul line is a good place to be. Obviously, if you wanted to move in a step, wherever you feel comfortable doing it, it's more about you just feeling what it is that you're doing with your hands versus the distance that you're shooting it at. Our second drill, we're going to do a very similar thing. We're just going to add a drop in. So we're going to make it a little bit more dynamic, but we're still going to start the same way, hand on top, and then as we're dropping to our level, our hands are then going to get behind the basketball, serving as the catalyst that allows us to get under the ball sooner on our push to the 2. So you'll see my hands down here. We can start with those arms almost extended to the ground, because as we drop, we're going to find our 1 position. I drop, I load, and then I'm 2 through. So our third progression will be a spin out and then catching and loading the hands on the spin out. So the footwork we're actually going to use is a step drop, meaning when we spin this ball out, whatever foot you want to step with, whether that be your left foot or your right foot, that's the foot that you're going to catch and initiate contact with. And then you're immediately going to go into your drop, dropping straight down vertically, but using that time on the drop to load the hands. Okay, so again, big emphasis here on the preparation piece, going to get that basketball, connect the ball to the body, load the hands on the drop, feet hit, ball moves on the push through. So what you can do with this same drill, which is still the third progression, is you can extend it out and you can work on catch, flip, and then on the third, catch, flip, shot. Our fourth and final progression, in terms of just being starting to understand and grasp those concepts of loading the hands, is going to be off of the dribble. We're going to use the same footwork, the step and drop, except this time we're going to take that ball for a ride with us. So when we take our dribble, it's going to be right hand dribble, left foot step, trying to get that ball and foot to hit together so that ball is moving with us. We're not wasting our dribble of a dribble, then a step. For our first dribble, that ball is going to move with us, and then right off that first step, we're dropping and loading those hands. Drop, load those hands. So we'll go right hand to start. Left hand. And now what we'll do is we'll elongate the movement, similar to how we did on the spin outs with the wrist flips. Now we'll do off the dribble with the wrist flip. So we'll go right hand dribble, left foot step on our drop, loading our hands each time. On the third one will be the shot.